That's a weird thing to say, but I'm very grateful to be alive. I do love just being alive and just doing things that I can do. We all have certain skills, abilities, talents, things that we might, like to share with the world. And for a lot of us, it's suppressed. A lot of us are told you can't do this, you can't do that. And I've grown up in a lot of different places. I was sharing with you earlier, but where we are now and where I'm right now, I have the freedom to be able to be myself. And, I can't ask for more, to be honest.
That's beautiful, man. Well, you're dropping a lot of gold and we haven't even started the podcast yet. So I'll give you an opportunity to do that. And I'll welcome you to the podcast and everyone else who's watching or listening. Welcome back to Coaches to the Moon podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here with Gavin Sequeira. Have I pronounced that right?
Pretty good. Awesome.
Gavin Sequeira is an international speaker. He's an author. He's the host of the Break Free from Corporate podcast. I can see he's wearing his own branded t-shirt there. We always appreciate that. And he's here to share some practical tips on building resilience, that mental toughness, and the game plan to move from your 9-to-5 job to a full-time business owner. Gavin, what a pleasure to have you, mate. Thanks for being here.
Hey, thanks very much, Alex. Love your work. I'm appreciative to be on your podcast. Thanks a lot.
Stop it. I won't have it. I still don't take compliments very well, but I'm working on that. But thank you, man. Podcasting's funny, isn't it? It's one of these things. It's very low barrier to entry, but very hard to crack as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll tell you a little story. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I started my podcast, right? So I wouldn't say I was one of the early ones, but certainly it wasn't that popular when I started it. And I got a few episodes underway and then life happened. I took maybe a 4-year break before I did the next one. And but I can see now it is such an amazing way to get your story out there, or get other people's stories out there. People are busy, they live busy lives. And if they can put on their earphones and go for a jog or go for a run and listen to some stuff that makes their life better, this is a great way to do it. So kudos.
Yeah, man, 100%. I meet so many cool people, and it's the way I consume content as well. I was talking to someone on the podcast the other day. She was like, "Do you have any book recommendations?" And I was like, "I haven't read a book in 7 years. I listened to everything. I tried to read a book recently, and it just didn't work. And it's a beautiful book. It's actually here. The End of Absence is the name of this book by a guy called Michael Harris. Okay. I feel if you're living in the country and enjoying yourself, I feel like you'd love that one, because what it is, it's about reclaiming what we've lost in a world of constant connection. So it's all about kind of we're constantly surrounded by the ability to speak to people, learn things, consume content, create content. And so we never get that time to think and come up with our big ideas and just kind of be engaged and present. And it's a kind of terrifying and beautiful book.
Oh, thanks for sharing. I will definitely check it out. I mean, I'm a slightly older generation where, books do mean something still. But I, like everyone else, we just get so busy. We don't get time to read. But sometimes the best thing you can do is just block everything out. Get rid of the technology if you can, like without, being without your mobile phone and without, someone pinging you every now and again, and just open a book. And even if you read a couple of pages, it can calm you down. So I might check it out.
100%, man. I'm not making this about me, but it's funny you said that. I'm actually doing a talk tonight called Staying Present in a Virtual World. Yeah. And, my whole business relies on social media and the internet. And now my daughters have come along. It's very easy to just be like, oh, no, I'm working when you're on your phone, but you're not working. You just like scrolling TikTok, So I'm getting pretty good at that. And I'm trying to push that message out to, other kind of people in my generation who are just like, sucked into that metaverse. But this isn't about me, Gavin. This is about you, sir. I'd love to start with a sort of less tangible question before we get into the nitty gritty of how you run your business, right? You and your family came to Australia from Kuwait as a kid, just as the Gulf War was starting. You said your dad was on a plane that got hijacked. Sounds like a crazy situation, right? So how do you think your day-to-day mindset and approach to life in business now is different, knowing that you could have ended up in a very different situation if you hadn't moved here?
Yeah, I mean, what you just said now in 10 seconds summarizes years and years and years of my childhood and growing up and living in a foreign country where, number one, you didn't have the rights that you have in a Western country, right? That's one thing. So I didn't know any better. There was no freedom of speech. I grew up I was born in Pakistan, grew up in the Middle East, lived in Kuwait for 11 years, like you said. And I'm half Portuguese, half Indian. That's my background. So I have a bit of all these different cultures blended in one, but I've lived in some places where you just don't have basic human rights, and I'm not saying they're bad places, but we don't enjoy the same freedoms. So you and I now are entrepreneurs, and you might have people listening to the podcast that are thinking of growing their business. Such things aren't always possible in other parts of the world. Even getting freedom to access a podcast isn't a thing in some countries. You can't just go on Google. For example, if you live in China, you don't have access to Google. Can you believe that? And so Google, YouTube, all of that out of the question. So, coming from that landscape and coming into Australia, one of the hardest things I had to learn was just accepting when people gave you stuff. So, for example, I was living with our cousins when we first came to Sydney, and we lived in a suburb called Cherrybrook. You probably know it, being a Sydney boy. And they poured water out of the tap and gave it to my mum and dad and myself and my sisters. And it took us a long time to drink the water out of the glass. Do you know why? Because you couldn't drink water from a tap in the places I grew up from. You just couldn't do it. It wasn't safe.
Yeah.
I couldn't even get used to someone handing me a glass of water. I got used to that after a while. And even just seeing, trees and grass growing in people's backyards wasn't a thing where I grew up, because, people lived in apartment buildings. It was all sand, desert, bricks and mortar. There were no trees. There was no grass. And when people said, "Oh, I've got to mow the lawn, I've got weeds in my backyard," I'm like, "You have weeds?" You have weeds, And so it sounds strange, but I don't take life for granted these days. And, I don't know if you've traveled a lot, but I've been to places like China where you can't see blue skies most of the time. And if you live in the UK, you don't see blue skies because it's raining all the time.
Yeah. Well, I'm an English boy. Yeah. So, yeah, no, 100%, man. It's the answer I was expecting, but it's lovely to hear it coming out of you, because you're clearly a very happy, grateful dude. Yeah. And, to have the opportunity to have weeds, right, is a funny thing, right? To have the opportunity to have the problems we have in business because we're able to freely start a business and then keep most of the money that we make from the business, right? And not have to give it to the, Chinese Communist Party or Fidel Castro or whoever's running the particular country, right? No, it's really cool, man. And why were you hopping around countries so much as a kid?
Oh, look, my family, I guess it's hard to say, but we were born in Pakistan, but it was troublesome times because we come from a Christian family and Christians were persecuted in that part of the world. Even though we weren't in any immediate danger, it wasn't safe. It wasn't even safe for women. It still isn't, to be honest. And so my family moved to Kuwait, which was the next nearest place, I guess, that you would, a lot of people in those days moved to. But again, there were a lot of suppression in those parts of the world. Men and women were not seen as equal players. And that's where I grew up. But when the war was breaking out in the Middle East between Iran and Iraq, and this is just before the Gulf War started, my family had to get out. And it was at the time, like you said, my dad was involved in a plane hijacking. We thought my dad was going to die, and people on that plane did die. And this is before social media and all. This was on BBC and all of the radio, because it was really the only way to get it out. My dad made a decision. We need to get out of this country. And where do we go? Who do we have family in? Australia, the US, Canada. And Australia came through. We moved here and all hell broke loose in that part of the world. And we were just grateful to be here. Fast forwarded to today, I guess, went to school, went to university, got a job, started the corporate life, much like Robert Kiyosaki says in Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? He pretty much followed the safe route because that was what was expected. And to be honest, it was all right. It was a good life, good lifestyle. And then I got dissuaded from the corporate lifestyle. I didn't like the political journey that most people were on, the competitive, cutthroat nature, just the fakeness about it. It's all about the dollar, chasing the dollar at all costs, and values were not respected in a lot of places. And so that's what got me to become more entrepreneurial. And
yeah, let's talk about it. Because
sure.
The corporate world is one that the only peek into it that I've had is through, I used to own a cafe on the bottom floor of an office block.
Right.
And so I'm from a hospitality background.
Okay.
I'm from a private school background, but I went to uni for like 6 weeks, not really my bag. And I went into hospitality, and then I owned this cafe in this corporate building. And that was my first peek into exactly what you said, kind of politics, things you can't say, kind of people, saying things to me. Like I was hearing office gossip, and people, as the barista, I was holding people's secrets and opinions of each other for them. And then they're going up and smiling and being like, oh my goodness, congrats, hope this email finds you well. And there was it felt like such a facade. Anyway, good for them. I'm proud that they're enjoying their lives or, doing what they think is best. However, you are a highly qualified guy, though, and you went to University of Sydney for significantly longer than I did. You have a solid corporate background, and as you just said, you became a bit disillusioned with 9 to 5, and now you help people to also move from their full-time work to full-time business. I'm curious, what's the biggest mistake you see people making when they do this transition, and what would you suggest they do instead?
Yeah, great question. So the biggest thing that people don't think about is the mindset shift that needs to happen. So it's one thing to go from the corporate lifestyle to business. A lot of people do it. It's quite common. I mean, anyone who has a business had to have started off working maybe somewhere else to begin with. So look, it's not uncommon, but there is also a statistic that says almost 90% or in the high 80s percentage of people that start a business that come from the corporate lifestyle or corporate background tend to fail. Now, why is that? The reason, there's two major reasons, and I've done a bit of research on this. There's a lot of reasons, but the two main ones is one, the mindset that they haven't shifted. They're quite entitled and they feel, I've come from this managerial position, or I've worked here for 20 years and I know how business works. They get into business and they stuff it all up. They go and run it to the ground. I've seen this happen with friends of mine. I've seen it happen to very close contacts that I've worked with, and I couldn't figure it out. I'm like, you're a smart person. How did this happen? Why did you run the coffee business into the ground? Why did you, have all your staff quit? Why can't you just put some systems in place? And the thing is, they haven't got that mindset working for them. The second reason is because they run out of cash. See, when you're working in a cushy corporate job, and I'm not talking necessarily earning hundreds of thousands of dollars, it doesn't matter what you earn, but if you're getting a steady paycheck every month, you tend to depend on that paycheck. So you get very complacent with, money's just going to keep coming in. I rock up to work, money keeps coming in. I don't have to do too much more than that. Money will just keep coming in. I keep paying the bills. I'll save, 10% or whatever it is and enjoy my life. When you get into business, it doesn't work like that, does it? It's very much like this, okay?
Yes.
And even if you're a billionaire, like someone like Elon Musk, right? The richest man in the world, his bank balance goes like this. He's still a billionaire, but he can make hundreds of millions in one day. He can lose a couple of billion in one day. Yep. So business is like this for everyone. And people who don't take that into consideration often make the biggest mistakes because they put all their eggs in one basket. And if it doesn't work out, they could lose a lot.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. The mindset one is a cool thing. I haven't heard that before, the entrepreneurial mindset versus the kind of employee mindset. Nothing wrong with employee mindset. It's super easy and lovely being an employee, and some of the most successful people in the world, are just people who've just worked through an employee ladder and are crushing it. Yep. The mindset, though, that money isn't always coming, and sometimes you have to do things for zero reward, is a tough one. What do you tell these corporate people when they come to you and they're like, Gav, I've been doing my business for 6 months now, and all I've done is put money in. Nothing's come out. I want to quit. What do you say to them?
Yeah, I guess, look, it's a tough conversation to have. I personally try and talk people about that before they've gone through the 6 months, but you can't talk to everyone, right? But the people I tend to work with, I almost try to prepare them for that, which is, look, the first 12 months of your business is going to be quite sketchy. Quite, if you see a few dollars, good. You might make a lot of money in that first 12 months. but it's going to be hard work. And there's going to be things that happen that you just can't prepare for. I mean, not many people can prepare for a pandemic. Not many people can even get through one. Not many people know how to deal with, your customers leaving. Not many people can deal with war happening in a country that could affect the price of oil, and suddenly it affects your business and you don't have suppliers on standby, or the mail system suddenly doesn't work and you can't get your products out to customers, and your business can go down very quickly. So I guess one of the hardest things to talk to people is, how do you build resilience in being able to withstand that period? And I can only speak of this because I guess I'm fortunate to have come from a place where, times were tough. We didn't at times know how we were going to put food on the table. We didn't know if we were going to be safe. When I grew up in the Middle East, it was a daily occurrence, I kid you not, pretty much almost a daily occurrence where bombs would actually go over our heads between Iran and Iraq. And the ground would shake a little bit and you wouldn't even think twice about it. This was normal life. Would
Wow.
we be here in a year's time, in 2 years' time? Hard to tell. But most people who've grown up in a cushy environment, parents put them through school, they've got a nice job, they haven't had to stress on too many things, don't know what it's like to then have to fend for themselves. And being in business is all about being creative and creating opportunities where you can add value, and hopefully the money will reflect that, down the track.
Yeah, that's really, really great advice for these people. We say these people like there's some
I wish someone told me this, a little
yeah,
while.
well, that's actually we're starting a new kind of offshoot of this podcast where you're going to get an email after the podcast, because we don't like to put people on the spot, which is going to say, what are 3 lessons you wish you knew before you started? And that's going to become some of the way we promote it. So
okay,
I'll let you think about that for the email, because I don't want to put you on the spot. But can you give us one? Can you give us one thing you wish you knew before you left your corporate job?
Yeah, I think one thing would be, I wish I made an effort to know more people that were in their own business, or to kind of network a little bit more with business owners. Because I'll tell you what, when you're in corporate, you talk to your colleagues, your boss, your people that in your team, all of that, and everyone talks about the same things: the problems with traffic and their kids and their families, and works too much and no one likes the boss, and all of those trivial sort of things. I call it first world problems, really.
Yep.
But no one's really talking about, gee, where's my next paycheck coming from? How many customers are we bringing in today? What promotion are we going to run? How are we going to make this thing generate revenue next month? These are not the conversations that average everyday people in cushy jobs have, unless you're responsible for a department or things like that. But I didn't know too many people that were in their own business when I started my business almost 15 years ago. And so to be honest, I was quite alone. So I would say probably the one tip I would say before you quit your job, before you make any kind of drastic moves, is talk to a few other people, find out what it's like, find out, their journey, listen to podcasts like this, yours, mine. There are a lot of others that show great stories of people that have gone through the journey, and you can sit and listen to a few of them and you can pick up some really valuable tips. I never had that opportunity. But I definitely, tell your listeners to go out and listen to a few people, save yourself a lot of heartache down the track.
There is so much good free content out there now that you can, if you were the most disciplined, self-accountable person ever, you could learn how to start a business completely for free from YouTube and do every element of it. No one's actually got the moxie to do it, because that's what we need coaches to make sure we do. But the amount of content is awesome. And one piece of content I'm liking is your 4-hour business method.
Right.
I think that we're on a similar page here. When you said you moved out to the country, I'm all about it. I'm a family man. You recently celebrated your first wedding anniversary. Congratulations. Much love to Allison. And we both have things we'd like to do other than just work. Now, obviously, the first years of a business can be pretty tumultuous, lots of long hours. But what are the first steps some people can take to cut down on those long hours once their business is actually, at least producing a bit of income?
Yeah. Great question. So, when I help people transition into their own business, you got to bear in mind, they're already busy people. They're working in their jobs full time, let's say. They've got family, they got kids, they got commitments. So to start a business on the side, you don't have a lot of resources. And I'm talking mainly time, even if you got the money. So how do you do something smarter, not necessarily harder, right? So we teach people how to put systems in place. Now, when I say systems, I mean, if you need to do things of a repetitive nature, how do you make a system so that you can do it more often, the same way, predictably, more efficiently, and in some cases, automated using technology? And if you can't do it or technology can't do it, how do you give it to someone else? How do you outsource it? And Alex, we live in such a great time now where you can get this stuff done really, really affordably. I mean, there are sites like Fiverr.com, Elancer, all of them where you can just outsource things. If you want to get a banner done, a logo created, a website built, you name it. You want to get a transcript to a video done. You want to even get your podcast uploaded. There are people who will do it for very, very low dollars, right? And so you can get it outsourced, you can get it systemized. That's what cuts the hours down. So something that might have taken, let's say, 10 hours to do, you can either get it done in an hour or a few minutes, or you won't even have to spend any time on it because someone else is doing it. So we teach people that from the start, and then we say, okay, what are all the things you need to do? What can you systemize? How do you systemize? And let's put a plan in place to have that done over the next 12 months. So you can then have a business that runs without a lot of your manual input. Does that make sense?
100%. I do a lot of these things myself. I think you've got to really just decide, do you want to leverage your time or your money?
Yeah.
And for me, at the beginning, it had to be time because I didn't have any money. But now it's like, okay, how can I get a few extra hours with my daughters in a week? That sort of thing. And that's what I'm all about. That's we're all working on our phones for the people on our phone backgrounds, right? And we spend so much time doing the work on the phone that we forget about the people who we've set as our own wallpaper. And so for me, I think you're 100% spot on. And I can always encourage people to quote someone I interviewed the other day, to stop doing $1,000 an hour. They stop doing $10 an hour tasks in $1,000 an hour time.
Right.
That thing, stop doing, not that it's not useful stuff. It's very, important things, but often it's the important, but, time sucking admin things that really make your business a big black hole of this time and money and despair, right?
Yeah. You just nailed a couple of really important things that I share with my audience as well, which is to value your time, right? And this is it's a significant difference. When you're an employee, your time is per hour or for your wage. You do a certain job, you get paid for that, right? So we're taught to value our time from that perspective. And hopefully as your career progresses in the corporate world, you earn more over time and you start to value your time a bit more. It's no different in business, right? If you're starting off doing a particular task in your business, or as business owners, when you start your business, you're doing everything, right? You're wearing multiple hats. You've got to start saying, well, all right, I create the videos, I create the content, I curate the stuff, I speak, I have to record, I have to then put a blog together, I've got to put a website together, I've got to manage all of these things. And I've got to think about my business plan. I've got to think about how is this going to work in the first year, the second year. And so it's a lot to take on. And at some point, you've got to go, well, which part of those activities is worth what? And you might say, well, out of all of those activities, maybe, curating the content is a low level activity. It's still important, but it's a lower level activity that I can give to someone else and pay a few dollars, which allows me to free up my time to do the higher level activity, which is working on the business a bit more. And so we teach people how to think like that. And that makes all the difference.
I love it. And that shift that, you don't have to trade your time for money in 2022 is a funny one. Yeah. And it's a hard mindset. One of my mentors, Scott Weddell, he says that if time is money, then how come Michael Jackson made $75 million last year? Right. Yeah. When he says it with Elvis, but I don't know how much money Elvis made last year, but it's something ludicrous for a guy who's been dead for 45 years or whatever. So it's really beautiful concept. And I think, I've got nothing but respect for people who are just down to make as much money as possible and create as much freedom. And that's their goal, their North Star for me. And it seems like for you as well, it is the things that come from that, the sort of the time freedom, the connection.
Yeah. Well, one of my mentors, a guy called Dr. John DeMartini, you may have heard of him. He was on The Secret and he speaks around the world. One of the things he talks about, Alex, is values. So what are your values that you pretty much identify with? And money for a lot of people, or financial freedom, is an important one, right? But what does it actually mean for you? And he describes money as being like a river, right? It's energetic. So a river will just flow through the boulders, through the creeks, through the rocks, wherever the path allows it to go. So money is one of those things. If you have a plan for it, it'll come to you. It'll work out. If you haven't got a plan, it'll come through your hands and it'll sift right through. It'll keep moving. It'll move to people who deserve it, who want it, who have a need and a use for it. So sometimes we see people who win the lottery, right? They win it and they lose it just as fast. And people can't figure out, and there's been studies done on this, why do most of the people who win a lottery end up poorer than they did when they won it? And the reason is because they never really had a plan for it. They never, they didn't respect money. It wasn't something that they valued, and it went to someone else. And you talked about Elvis, he's dead, but he still makes money because he was smart enough when he was alive, or people around him advised him. He had good mentors, good people, a good team of management, etc., around him that told him, if you set this thing up, if you set up a system, if you set up this business, or you set up a particular way of earning money, it'll keep coming in as a residual, regardless of the effort you put in. And I guess that's one of the beauties of being in your own business. You can set up systems, you can set things up so that you don't always have to physically be there all the time. We're probably not all going to be at the same sort of league as an Elvis Presley or an Elon Musk, but we can learn from these guys, right? They put things in place. They build systems, they build businesses that can work eventually to make them redundant. So I always teach people, let's help you set up a business where you eventually are out of a job. And they laugh at me, but if you can do that, you will make more money than you could ever dream of, because you won't have to work as hard as the guy next door. Does that make sense?
100% it does. It makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. And it's a very funny way of putting it. Start a business that, you can fire yourself from.
Yeah, 100%.
I think Elvis did everything right except for those movies that he did. I'm not sure if he should have done movies. He was.
Look, everyone's done good and bad things. So he did do a lot of movies, though, didn't he?
You would, though, wouldn't you? You would. If someone said, "How would you like to star in every movie now?" You'd be like, "Yeah, I'll do it."
Yeah.
I'm 26. No worries. Dude, let's finish off with a bit of left of field. For anyone watching the video, you can see you're in your Zen room. We got a little Buddha over there. We got like a teddy bear, some karate stuff, a mandala, a globe. You've got a busy job. You're a busy man. You've done corporate stuff. You're always thinking. You're always working to improve the world. How do you like to disconnect from your job and reconnect to yourself at the end of the day?
Yeah, great questions. Another really important one. So I like to take time out. One of the reasons I moved to the country is for a change of scenery, a change of atmosphere, a change of lifestyle, getting away from that busy corporate dog eat dog, compete with the Joneses, stuck in traffic every day environment. Because I did that for a long time and I loved it, but I don't love it anymore. I got away from that. And so what I do these days is, I spend time with my wife. We've got some pets over here. I do a lot of gardening. I do karate. Bless you. I do karate. I play tennis. I'm involved with my community over here, but I still keep very actively engaged with the public in general. So, I get on podcasts like yours. I interview people as well. I like to stay connected. For me, this is not work. And to be perfectly honest with what I do, I don't consider it work. So, even if I'm talking to one of my clients and I'm chatting and I'm helping them in their business, I feel like I'm talking to a friend because we have that deep connection. I have a vested interest in helping them succeed. I want them to do really well. I never find what I do stressful. And I don't feel like I totally need to disconnect. Even if I'm traveling or going on a holiday, I'll take the odd call here and there. I'll check things online if I have to. I don't feel like I need to separate the work from my life because I've managed to integrate it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I do things outside, but I don't feel I have to kind of, get away from it. Yep.
100%. How beautiful is that? I think that's a goal we can all work towards, is to where your work is such a pleasure that you don't feel like you need to get away from it. So awesome advice, man. And you know what? I feel like we're friends just from this podcast.
Yes.
If you'll allow me to compliment you, you're a super friendly guy, really lovely to talk to. I'm glad we did the video because your smile in your eyes just make me feel safe and loved, Gavin. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I've really enjoyed it.
Alex, thank you very much. You're awesome. Keep up the great work, and might have to get you on our podcast to share how you went through your transition, because I'm sure you've got a pretty good story to share as well. So thanks a lot, guys.
Sounds great, man. I can't wait. And as Gavin said, thank you so much for anyone who's watching live or listening or on the recording. We love you all to bits. I'll actually be back tonight with another episode of Coaches to the Moon because I've double booked myself today. So I'll see you there. Until then,